The Nomiki Show.
Jordan Zakarin is back. He's a media producer with the More Perfect Union and runs the Progressives Everywhere newsletter, which spotlights progressive candidates, campaigns, and causes. And Natalie Shure is here, a writer and researcher, and a columnist at the New Republic. Oh boy, what a day. I'm sure you all woke up to the news that Roe v. Wade is kind of, sort of, not really a law anymore in some states, coming to a state near you. Let's play this clip on MSNBC about this Texas abortion law. This is a clip on MSNBC from legal analyst Barb McQuaid, basically discussing how this law works.
That is what makes this law so diabolical, I think, for two reasons. I mean, number one, because it's not involving state action of bringing criminal actions against doctors who perform abortions, it is incentivizing bounty hunters to go out and find people who are performing abortions so they can collect their reward. That alone, I think, is going to create a really dangerous scenario.
All right. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to go over with this decision. Let's start with you, Natalie. I mean, I think the first part about this that really confuses me is this is based on a heartbeat. This is sort of their premise, but it seems like the science is really murky on that. And now she's saying, the legal analyst is saying that they're bounty hunters, or whatever you want to call them, are going to be out patrolling.
Yeah. So my understanding of the law is that it was designed specifically to circumvent Roe versus Wade, which says that no state may legally ban abortion for the first trimester, or however long it happens to be. And what this law does is, instead of the state making it illegal, the state basically deputizes individual vigilantes, saying that any resident of the state can sue any abettor of abortion. So not the patient themselves, but their partners, their abortion providers, anyone who works at a clinic, anyone who so much as drives them to their appointment. Those people are all eligible to be sued for something around $10,000. I think that might be a minimum. They might be able to collect more. And so what that basically does is pretty much nullifies anyone's ability to actually get an abortion. Any providers who are actually trying to provide healthcare for their patients will be just bogged down with legal harassment, have their coffers drained by these payouts. And so they've essentially found a way to make it illegal without running afoul of the literal letter of Roe versus Wade. And the Supreme Court had until midnight to basically step in and block it, and they did not do that. So as of today, people are being turned away from abortion clinics. People are unable to access care. And I think it's important to note that this is overwhelmingly affecting poor people. Rich people who need abortions are still going to be able to cross state lines. It's inconvenient, but they're going to be able to do it. The ones who are going to find themselves in truly dire straits are the most vulnerable people who are going to see their autonomy frighteningly curtailed by this.
I mean, the other aspect of this is infuriating to me is, we just came out of this election, the presidential election, in which so much emphasis was put on Texas being a state that probably arguably has been more blue for a while. But, there's a point where even if you do no organizing, demographics will catch up, and at least with the popular vote when it comes to statewide elections. But you have, of course, a legislature that is quite conservative, quite crazy conservative. You have appointed justices, new judges that will be maybe potentially overseeing many of these cases if they're presented, if lawsuits do go forward, in which they won't dismiss them because of, in a normal world, if some kook vigilante decides to sue an abortion provider based on what? That's the other question. It's like, were you in the hospital room with this person? Were you in the room with this, You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
was that a HIPAA violation? I'm sorry. How did you discover this information that this person was seeking an abortion when they just went into a Planned Parenthood to get a breast exam, to get birth control, to get an abortion? How do you know? I mean, any reasonable judge, sane judge that did not have an agenda would question probably some of these things. But the ecosystem, the structures are set up by these extreme right-wing Republicans who have a clear agenda. And I can't help but go back and think to myself, where have the Democrats been? Jordan, I mean, you're covering, like, this is happening everywhere. There's civil rights, Roe v. Wade, they've annihilated us.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the first question I have is for quickly on this thing, Natalie, they don't technically outlaw it after 6 weeks, I guess, but why would you be allowed to sue someone for something that's legal? How does that come in?
I don't know. I don't know the exact writing of the law, but my understanding is that they are able to, like, they basically have standing to sue for, I don't know if it's emotional damages or what it is that empowers individual vigilantes, but they are able to sue after 6 weeks. So it's not technically saying it's illegal, but it's saying that it's something that affects some random person to such an extent that they do have standing to sue.
But on that point, that's where a case would get dismissed in a normal world. What evidence?
Right.
What evidence are you providing? Where are you getting this evidence? Were you in the doctor's room with them? Was it somebody who came to you afterwards to say, I got an abortion? I mean, that's, I think, ultimately, like, the how did this get through the Supreme Court? I mean, yes, these justices have an agenda and they're there to serve a purpose, but this is like, you lose your law license for this if you represented this person.
I mean, the Supreme Court also just overturned, the immigration, the fact that Biden didn't want to send people back to Mexico immediately. They overturned that, even though they gave executive privilege to Trump on that. They just kind of reversed that. They reversed the housing moratorium for no particular reason. I mean, these are not, when we talk about conservative, I don't think they're ever principled, but certainly not now. It's certainly not. They want conservative outcomes, not conservative readings of the law. So, I mean, I think, like, that's all out the window. This idea that, people are saying, oh, Brett Kavanaugh, he's pretty moderate, actually. He had a decent session last time, and they're just, waiting to pick their spots. But in terms of politics, I mean, I did an interview, and it was right in my newsletter last weekend with Mondaire Jones, the representative here in New York, and he said basically, the issue of the filibuster is not the fact that people are afraid of Senate comedy. They're not afraid of losing the tradition. It's that they don't want to have to vote on tough things. They don't want to have progressive policy go through. I mean, you see the two people behind me here talking about how they're going to keep the filibuster going. They don't care, and we're seeing the way that Democrats in the House, Josh Gottheimer, his gang ghouls, they tried to sabotage the reconciliation bill. They still may do it. We seeing Washington Post reported today just a huge number of lobbyists descending on Washington to try and destroy the reconciliation bill. I mean, Democrats, they have power at the, every part of the national government. They could right now end the filibuster. They could expand voting rights. They could expand the Supreme Court. They could do it by, like, lunchtime. Well, maybe it depends if you're on the West Coast, but they could do it, within the next 2 days. That stuff could be easily done. The bills have been written. Mondaire Jones, Jerry Nadler, Ed Markey, all these people have already written these bills. These things could happen. They are just afraid to lose their corporate patrons.
Joe Biden can, for so many things, just sign it. Yes. Literally, whether it's student debt relief, so many others, more than what he's already signed. He has the executive power to do so. It's like the shtick is up. Like, everyone knows what's going on.
This is what they want. You still see on the internet people saying, well, they can't wait. They need moderates in the caucus. They need moderates. Well, look, Kirsten Sinema, there was a poll that came out yesterday. 60% of voters in Arizona, and, like, both parties, independents, all together, they said they would rather see voting rights being protected, even if it didn't include Republicans in a bipartisan bill. They would rather see that. There's no excuse other than them not caring. And it gets down to it, for too long, people have rallied behind Democrats. Oh, they're the good guys. They're fighting for us. Chuck Schumer can put out a statement. Nancy Pelosi can put out a statement. Oh, we're going to fight for abortion rights. We're going to fight for voting rights. But at the end of the day, you judge people by what they do, and Democrats have completely abandoned everyone. And, personally, I am desperate to see them expand the Supreme Court to protect voting rights. But if they get wiped out, like, they're going to deserve it, and then we're going to be, back to square one. But I don't know.
I want want to talk about this expanding a Supreme Court thing for a while, because I do think I understand what it would do historically. This isn't a question about if it's a good thing or bad thing in this moment. It's a question of, this is a reactionary thing to, frankly, the other work that the Democrats haven't done, which is there's no operation. It's an empty building. There's nothing happening. You can't win back. You can't win if you don't exist. They don't exist. That's ultimately, they hand out like $10,000 grants to like Texas Democratic Party. They're like, here, go figure it out.
Yeah.
Go figure out how to win back that legislation.
For a couple weekends.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly. The thing is, they would much rather be in opposition, I think, be the ones. I'm surprised. I think it's only because this happened on the first of the month, because there's so many fundraising emails that went out yesterday end of the month. This is like, in a way, a boon to Democrats. The amount of money, if you recall how much money they took in with Ruth Bader Ginsburg when she passed last fall, it was setting records on Act Blue. They were setting records, and not that they didn't try to win elections, but that was the goal. That was raising that money was the goal. And so until people stop giving money to these hacks, until they stop donating to these people.
I don't even agree with that. They're raising more money than ever. The Democratic Party is raising more money than ever, but it's not going to organizing.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm saying, is that until people stop donating to bad actors, until they stop rewarding people.
Yeah, what they need to do? They need to demand that the Democratic Party be transparent and have like basic accountability. I'm like a broken record on this. I'm even sick of myself talking about it. But the bottom line is, I don't know, have a transparent budget. Don't make there is an entity of people that are voting that have been elected. Yeah. And there's a committee above them that's been appointed that basically nulls out anything that they've decided. And that committee that's been the rules committee is all consultants that are making money off of these big entities. Sure. It's a joke. It's an absolute joke. And until people start to actually demand that, I mean, the problem is that there was a brief moment, there was enough pressure, and then they just delayed votes, and now nobody cares, and reporters don't care, and that's how it happens.
I mean,
but expanding the Supreme Court, it's not going to happen.
Policy is entirely buried in when it comes to the way reporters work, right? The status quo is what they, when I talk about reporters say national media, I mean, you look at, there was a story in the New York Times, incredible this weekend, what happened with Florida, what went wrong there with COVID. And they're like, the only time they mentioned Ron DeSantis was saying that he opened vaccine clinics and tried to get people vaccinated. There's no interest in consequences or how people use power or policy. And until there's actual consequences for that beyond, palace intrigue, until there's any interest in that, until people are actually held accountable, none of this is going to change, because honestly, people who have been in D.C., they've been making the same people for the last 40 years, and they don't care. Nothing's going to change for them. And so I think part of, maybe, Democrats, they don't fear their base, first and foremost. They need to fear their base, and they don't. And so they feel like they can do whatever they want because they're going to get donations whenever this happens. And so, I don't think I'm going to be the one to stop the spigot of money, but there needs to be, come next year, some serious primary consequences. And honestly, you look at the Tea Party, they failed to take back the House in 2010, but they sent a message, and eventually, things changed there. And look, they're a bunch of horrible people, but Democratic voters are just as, in a way, I mean, they entrusted Democrats, and Democrats in the Senate have failed them time and time again. At some point, you got to say, all right, what do we got to do differently here as voters, as activists, as organizers, as anyone involved in anything that's not in the Capitol?
Yeah, I think Jordan's right to connect all of this to the idea of primaries. I mean, when I think about, Nomiki, you were saying earlier, the thing about how is it that judges are going along with this? How is it that, there's consent for this kind of law? And Republicans have been at this for a while. They have definitely been pursuing a legal movement to remake the courts to be amenable to their legislative wish list for years now. And they're really seeing the fruits of those labors. And part of why the Republicans are so ruthlessly effective at implementing a far-right agenda relative to the Democrats is that they are ideologically unified. There is this agreement of that is what they're there to do. And the Democrats are more of a, disparate party with people with different interests. And I think that, when I look at the insurgent left electoral movement, Bernie Sanders, AOC et al., I think that one way of looking at those things is that they are basically trying to make the Democratic Party more ideologically coherent. And I think part of the reason that the Democratic Party is so waffling and ineffective is it's because it's ostensibly claiming to be a party for workers, for downtrodden, but also for executives and for the consultant class at the same time. And like, that's going to work in certain situations. And that's still going to be, I think, a better coalition in many cases than the one that the Republican Party has cultivated. Their ideology, they are going to face back. The interest in removing the filibuster is something that is going to run afoul of the interests of the people who are currently in power in the party. And we need to stop. We need to stop that situation and remake, how the party is constituted.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I think part of the problem is that, like I said, they don't fear their voters. And I guess the difference here, and fingers crossed, I don't know, I have no faith in anything anymore, is that this is not, about affordable housing. This is not about something that threatens rich people. I mean, rich folks love donating to, abortion funds, Planned Parenthood, all these things. These are like social issues. And I personally, there shouldn't be a distinction. I think it should be all connected. I mean, abortion is certainly like a issue for low-income women more than anyone else. Like, it should not be. Things are all interconnected. But people who don't see it that way, or haven't thought that much about it, in the same way, gay rights really took off in the mid-aughts up until Obama legalized gay marriage, and I think that probably, these things, obviously, it's social issues that really drive a lot of these rich donors, and so I wonder if there is going to be some kind of pressure that there hasn't been before from certain parts of the party, from certain donors, to really make a change here. And I don't know if it's going to be, they might say, hey, look, if you get rid of the filibuster, we might have to be forced to raise your taxes. I don't know if they care that much. But, I do think that there's going to be some, hopefully there's going to be some extra, I don't depend on rich people. I don't think they're going to come save us. But now they've pissed off people who generally don't care about working class people, about the downtrodden, like Natalie said, about the poor, people who, love charter schools. They piss them off too. Mm-hmm. And so maybe that possibly, I don't know. Again, I don't have any hope, but
this kind of reminds me of a scenario in New York when right after Trump got elected, people started paying attention to local politics again. And they were like, wait, what? Like the normie Democratic voters and even many progressives were like, wait, the Senate in New York is elected Democrat, but wait, there's 8 senators who are holding up codifying Roe v. Wade. Why are we debating this? What is going on? This is New York State. They're holding up a slew of other very normie Democratic platform items. And how are we getting away? And people started to get more educated about it. And so you saw this coalition of, Bernie Sanders, Democratic socialists, and Amy Siskind, a former John McCain supporting, now Democrat who supported Hillary. And that was the kind of coalition that was needed. And it was very granular, but ultimately these fights are granular. I mean, that's what the Republicans have been so good at doing over the many decades they've been doing this at the same time as Democrats have just been on the Democratic presidential money-making machine train, whatever that is.
There's no incentive. There's no incentive for Democrats to do the right thing other than their own personal consciences. And so because so many Democrat lawmakers are rich, they come from rich families, they've made a lot of money. So the only policies they're going to pass are going to probably hurt them financially. And so there's no incentive for them personally. There's no incentive for the lobbyists that come after them to want to pass good things. And so, unfortunately, the Republicans, their incentives align entirely with their donors, and they don't care about abortion, or they, are just awful people on that issue too. And so when there's no incentives for Democrats because they're so dominated by lobbyists, because they're worried about their lobbying careers. Look at, you mentioned Heidi Heitkamp. Heidi Heitkamp, she was a decent Democrat, and then she decided to go work for, people who are trying to stave off capital gains increases on step up investments, basically. So if you own a stock, if you have an investment in something, that if you die, it gets passed tax-free to your heirs. There is no real incentive to fight for progressive issues beyond being a good person, which unfortunately in this country does not get you very far.
On that note, there's let's talk about the eviction moratorium just briefly. I'm sorry. I'm just so much great news. I warned the audience at the top of the show. I was like, it's a really bad day, guys. The one nice thing I said was happy September. And then we moved on from there. Unless, is there anything else you guys want to talk about in terms of actually, you know what, before we go to eviction moratorium, let's put up this tweet from Malika Jabali. She's a friend of the show. I hate to regurgitate this, but since we are talking about organizing, I do want to bring this up because I almost felt like this was like on cue. Do you have that tweet from Malika? All right. So Jill Filipovic, I believe that's how you say her name. She's like one of these people you know on Twitter, and then you're like, have I ever had to say her name before? She had originally tweeted about earlier in the day, good work, everyone who voted for Trump or Jill Stein in 2016 or didn't vote or undermined Clinton from the left because the Supreme Court doesn't really matter and it'll be fine. Abortion vigilantes in Texas, thank you for your support. Of course, Malika Jabali, who does a lot of work on this, said there were almost as many people who were non-voters in 2016 after voting for Obama in 2012 as there were those who swung from Obama to Trump. Those non-voters were disproportionately lower income and people of color. Instead of this constant blame game, maybe we should try to ask them. And she, quoted some text there. I wanted to bring this up because, we have to also keep in mind here that the margins in 2020 between Trump and Biden were smaller in those same states than they were in 2016. So this tactic's not working. Nothing seems to be working. I mean, this is like the song that never ends. And I'm bringing it up because like, this is somebody who's in our age demo. This isn't somebody who has been completely brainwashed by neoliberalism over the last 40 years, doesn't know another way. This is somebody who is part of our genre. Because I sit there at the end of the day and I say, okay, well, time is on our side if climate change doesn't kill us first. At least like we'll have more progressives being elected locally and nationally, and the narrative will start to shift and power will, they'll have no choice but to surrender a little bit here and there. But then I read things like this. Natalie, I'll go to you. What were your thoughts on this moment?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that Green Party, third party voters will ever be a decent way to analyze an electoral problem. They obsessively cling to the idea of Jill Stein or Ralph Nader before, without really considering the degree to which I think they make less of a difference than people think if they hadn't run. I don't think that either would have affected the outcome. A lot of the arguments really hinge on the idea that every single Green Party voter would be a Democratic voter. And it's really like a stranger crew than that. There are people who would leave things blank or vote for Republicans. I mean, it's really like not an easy cohort to understand. There are millions of non-voters. And, at the end of the day, there will always be quirky things like this. You're not going to get rid of third parties. You're not going to get rid of the fact that a marginal number of people are going to vote for them. What you can do is run a good candidate that people like, run a good campaign, get as many votes as you can. Sometimes it'll, end up your way. Sometimes it won't. But anyone who points to third party voters as an explanation, particularly given the fact like, okay, what's the plan? Just like scream at people about it forever. I just think it's a completely useless line of thinking and discussion that will obfuscate far more than it elucidates. And Malika's right. There's a lot more relevant data points to look at why voters behave the way that they do. I think, people want something to be mad at. People want something very direct to cling to and have a meltdown over. And I kind of get that, but gosh darn it, it is useless.
But I also think it's very intentional and to pull away from the conversation we just had for the last 15 minutes, which was, why are we not winning? Why are we losing when the numbers are on our side? And there's so much more here. And it can't be about a small minority of people, like a small chunk of people that potentially could have voted Democrat. But we're going to be caught in these arguments more and more. And, as much as we hate to ignore, to fight with these people online, we have to correct the record. And she has a very large audience, not just on Twitter. Obviously, she has a large audience when she publishes a piece that determines talk show conversations, whether it's ours or MSNBC. And I mean, it does make a difference. They're setting the narrative, Jordan. So, you know,
I mean, I think I think the problem is people who say those narratives, who give those narratives, they feel comfortable with the way politics are, the way that things are, like at that moment, like they felt okay in 2016. They said, oh yeah, we can continue what's happening. They don't ask, why didn't people want to vote for Democrats again? What made them go vote for a third party? They actively rejected the two-party system that created this mess. They said, I do not trust government. I do not trust the people that are in this government. I want something very, very, very different, even if it's just a protest. So they knew that, Green Party or Jill Stein, whomever, weren't going to win. But they wanted to say, I don't know, again, if they're right or left, they said, this system doesn't work for me. These people don't work for me. It's all screwed up. I'd rather protest. I'd rather go say, like, fuck it, than actually, participate in this system. That's what a third party vote is right now. I'm not on the local level, but on the national level for sure. And so instead of asking like, why are people upset? Why aren't people voting for us? Why aren't voting for the, people I support? Why aren't people, turning out or being energetic or, why aren't they, turning out in mass numbers for Gavin Newsom in the recall election, even though Democrats haven't done anything? Don't shame them. Like, give them something to vote for. I've been saying this for years. And like, all right, so if you look at even Biden's numbers, I don't want to get off base, but you look at Biden's numbers once the stimulus passed, great. It was like almost 60% approval in such a polarized country, right? And now the stimulus has worn off. People have spent it. Unemployment benefits have worn off in half the states. Republicans pulled them, but they're going to be over in the next couple of days anyways for the rest of the country. Democrats haven't passed literally anything useful. Nothing has happened other than some good stuff in the FTC and NLRB, but no one's looking at that. And, you're not, if you're like working at your average job, you're not paying attention. Like I barely paid attention until I started doing this for a living. You can't just say, oh, we're going to do this. I mean, President Biden and DSCC just came with a statement saying this attack on women's health care is a powerful reminder of the stakes in next year's election, why we must defend a Democratic Senate majority with the power to confirm or reject Supreme Court justices. They can do that now. They can make differences in people's lives, give them something to vote for. I bet you if they passed a big reconciliation package that made permanent I hate the term child tax care credit, call it like a kid stimulus or something, family stimmy check, I don't know. But that stuff would make a difference, but instead, by giving people victories. Why do you think people went to Trump? It's because they felt like, he's a huge loser, but he projects as a big winner. Right? He projects as a fighter, and that's what Republicans are doing. They're pretending that, as much as they're like aggrieved, and they've always been aggrieved, they're now like fighters and saying, we're going to take it to you. We're going to run over you with our car. We're going to drive you off the road. It's insane. It's horrible. But like, it gets people pumped up, and Democrats, folks who are tweeting about it, they just want to shame people into voting for people who don't do anything for them.
I'm so glad that you mentioned this, because I immediately thought of this next thing I wanted to show you, which was, Jen Psaki was on stage talking about the eviction moratorium. Can we play this clip really quick? Because I think it relates exactly to what you're saying.
The last update I wanted to provide to all of you is that as part of our all across government approach to preventing evictions, today Attorney General Merrick Garland is calling on the entire legal community to take immediate action to help prevent unnecessary evictions during this public health emergency. The Attorney General's call to action asks major law firms, law school students, and individual lawyers to work with courts, legal service providers, and nonprofits through pro bono services to ensure access to justice for vulnerable tenants. So far, over 40 major law school deans, including from Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Columbia, Howard, UCLA, and more, have already committed their students in law clinics to help prevent evictions. And presidents of several major legal organizations, including the Legal Services Corporation, the American Bar Association, and the National Housing Law Project, have joined the commitment to immediate action. And on Thursday, we will join a nationwide emergency rental system program training held by the Association of Pro Bono Counsel and Law Firm Anti-Racism Alliance.
Does anybody, is there a billionaire who wants to start a nonprofit to work on this? You'll get some tax breaks too while you're at it. It's everybody else's job but theirs. This is a perfect example. I watched this and I like fell off of my chair. Natalie, please. Or would you go ahead? Just jump in. Just please.
Yeah, like if only we knew some powerful people. Now it helps.
Yeah, those are the Harvard deans. They used to work in government and now they've just retired and they're like, presidents of law schools.
I honestly don't want to support any candidates that have not had to worry about paying rent in the last 15 years. I do not want to support any candidate that is not oh no, I lose my job. What happens to my mortgage? I do not want to support any candidate. It's not like, you know what, I may have to give up my second vacation home. That is not the kind of candidate I want because, well, it's important to have young candidates. I think it's important to have young lawmakers as well because they've experienced a dystopia that I don't think a lot of people who've been in Washington for the last 40 years have experienced. I don't think anyone that's under 70 years old cares what a Harvard dean says about housing. I don't think anyone cares at all. And I don't know that Democrats even care, but it's a nice game of dress up, I guess. But until we have, candidates and we have legislators and senators and whatnot who had to worry about student debt, who are trying to decide, all right, should I pay during this moratorium, or should I try and pay it off, or should I, make sure that if I go unemployed or if I go freelance and I get hit with taxes, that I'll have enough to eat. That's the kind of people we need running this country, because otherwise, why would they expect people to vote for them if they don't know what they go through?
It's so interesting you say that. I was talking about this yesterday with somebody. When I ran for office, there were 17 candidates in the race. And on one of the debate stages, there were I think 11 or 13, I can't remember. And everybody on that debate stage, except for maybe myself and another person, had served in office. The other person was, at a law firm. She was a lawyer at a law firm. And they asked who rented. I was the only candidate who literally, there's city council members. I could not believe in New York City, which has, if not the most diverse and now majority female held city council, that everybody on that stage was a homeowner in New York City. And it reminded me of this conversation that happened with the mayors when they asked the mayors, what is the average price of a home? And none of the mayoral candidates were anywhere near what the average price of a home in Brooklyn was. And I'm like, oh, ask them about rent. I'm really curious about that because majority of the city council members are homeowners in New York City. So I really think it's a much, much, much deeper issue than we're even aware of, even with this with progressive young people running. I'm very curious, you have to do your financial disclosures. How many of these people, all of them had cars, by the way. I was the only person who didn't have a car also. What? I was what land am I living in? And who are the people I know?
It's like it's as if would you go to a doctor that has never felt pain, who doesn't know what it's like to feel sick or feel pain? Because that's what it's like right now. That's what our government is right now. People.
Yes, that's called going to an OBGYN. Welcome to being a woman.
Yeah. Or maybe half of the dentists I've gone to. But it's, you're electing people that don't care because they've never experienced it. Or if they have, they're horrible people. And
I think people have no sense of how big this is. This is much, much bigger than just a millionaire federal government, millionaire and billionaire. I think it's institutional. As long as we have campaigns that are based on how much money that you have to raise to get attention. And it even happens on the progressive side. Let's not bullshit ourselves. We all know very well, there are a lot of progressive organizations who have a great way of making money off of these progressive campaigns. We have to prevent ourselves from becoming what the neoliberals were or
they'll just back candidates that they know can make money.
Exactly. That's it.
They don't know when. Yeah.
Because, it's matching funds.
At least New York has that system where you get a certain number of public funding. If you are running for something.
Yeah, but that incentivizes organizations to push for candidates that can raise that money. Having done it, it's not easy. You'll see bartering. It's I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's not perfect. It's very, very flawed. Very flawed.
I don't disagree, but I think that, the idea that not only at the federal level, someone running for office doesn't get any public support or assistance. New York has that, and they still have the outcomes that they do electorally. It's a completely depressingly flawed system.